listening longer than that. And I've been speaking longer than that, but this is my first attempt here, so I thought I might be a little nervous, so I had a full physical exam today. Everything's relative, right? In the last little while, thanks to Victoria Writers and Smashwords.com, I've kind of done a lot of different kinds of writing, but I've sort of settled on two vehicles, and one of them is what I'm going to be reading from tonight, and that is the vehicle of a grandmother imparting information and stories to her grandson. And of course, grandmother gets in a lot of takes, so it's humorous stuff. She gets in digs towards her own son, so one gets that point. So it's taken from a series called Stories from Grandmother's Knee. Right? So I'm just going to read a short excerpt of Blackberry Picking with Kerosene. The pair were almost finished picking enough of the tantalizing sweet fruit to make pies for the evening's meal's dessert, when the boy looked at his grandmother's hands, pulling and plucking clusters of berries just above his reach, silhouetted in the lowering afternoon sun. Somewhere above them a red-tailed hawk made passes in lazy circles, its shadows cast over them occasionally as it passed in front of the sun. "Grandma, where did those come from?" he asked, pointing up to some brown patches on the backs of grandmother's hands. "Those weren't there before, were they? Are they from the berries?" he asked, quickly checking the backs of his own hands. Grandmother darted a glance at him and then at her hands. "It's nothing," she said, "just age spots. You won't get any like these for many, many years to come." "Did Grandpa have them? I don't remember." The boy turned his head on an inquisitive angle, relishing the conversation with grandmother. Sean and his grandmother loved to talk, and when they did, she did most of the talking, and he did most of the listening, which was as it should be, she said, as she knew a lot more to talk about, and she had already listened enough, and he had to catch up on his listening. "Oh yes, your grandfather had many. You were just, you were just too young to notice, is all." She thought of how such a long, short time stood between Sean and his grandfather. "Your grandfather would pick with me, and it was great fun. We would take a ladder to get really high berries. Sometimes he would shove the ladder right into the patch, and then he would walk up the ladder and crush down the vines to make a path to the inside. We would have tunnels running like lots of caves. One time, your grandfather got the idea of using kerosene to burn into the berry patch. That worked pretty well, but then your father saw it, and he tried the same thing. That was all right until the fire escaped and raced across the pasture to the hen house. Your grandfather and I had gone to Victoria to get supplies. That meant an all-day trip. Your father was older than you are now, about 13, almost 14. Anyway, he was old enough to be left alone. We didn't have any hoses or even a good water supply. Most of our water was stored in a big cistern, a concrete tank we used for saving rainwater in the summertime. He had to get buckets and brooms and run back and forth, getting more and more water to soak the brooms and try to beat out the flames before all the chickens went up in smoke. Sean watched as his grandmother placed her hands on her hips underneath her canvas apron and saw a dark frown cross her face, darker than any hawk's shadow, as she stared intently at nothing in particular. Then she shook her head, made a clucking sound, and continued. "My best kitchen brooms were destroyed. Grandfather and I got home late that night after all the kerfuffle. We didn't find out what had happened until the next morning when we went up the hill to feed the chickens. Your dad couldn't even find his running shoes. He had run right out of them fighting the fire." "Wasn't he scared?" asked Sean, his eyes big and mouth even bigger. "Damn right he was scared, and for good reason," said grandmother, almost forgetting to whom she was speaking. "But soon he was too tired to be scared. When you think of what could have happened, if the fire had jumped from the grass, he must have watched in horror as it crept closer and closer to the clap-trap chicken house made of flimsy leftover plywood sheets used to build the form for the cistern." "Would all the chickens die?" asked Sean. "Wouldn't they be able to run away or fly away?" "The chickens?" grandmother asked incredulously. "Oh no, that wasn't it. The real danger was that the forest was right behind the chicken chicken house. If that fire had gotten into that salal and those huge fir trees, well then, they would be evacuating the whole island with Navy ships, like they almost had to do in 1956 when you were just a baby. And for the record, you're giving the chickens far more credit for self-preservation than they have coming. Sean trudged alongside his grandmother, making a storm of talc-like dust rise from the winding country road, eagerly wanting to keep the conversation going. Did anything else dangerous ever happen? Sean wanted to know. Well, yes, but that was mainly an accident having to do with your father. One time I had him out helping me get plums in the orchard. He was about your age, not much older. The idea of his father being his age intrigued Sean, and in a secret tone of awe, he asked, "What happened?"